You have to walk the talk. You have to be authentic as a leader. If you're not doing it, they see that.
It is entirely universal. There's other people who are going through this.
For me, a great leader needs to be able to marry three things: vision, systems, and people.
Welcome to Leadership Moments. If this is your first time, and if you are returning, thank you for your support.
This show is about leaders from all walks of life, leadership tips, and maybe even a little of what you wouldn't expect to help you in leadership.
We would appreciate it if you tell someone else about our podcast as we strive to support all leaders that want to just be better.
Let's get on with the show.
Today, our guest is Amy Kemp. Amy is the owner and CEO of Amy Kemp, Inc. As a certified habit finder coach, she helps clients replace subconscious thought habits that are no longer serving them with more healthy ones. She has worked through the Habit Finder curriculum with hundreds of leaders in one-on-one settings and also in leadership teams at small and large companies. In addition, Amy teaches online courses that are designed to challenge and expand her clients' understandings of themselves and to welcome new, curious people into the scope of her work. With the launch of her book, I See You, a guide for women to make more, have more, and be more without more work, Amy has created an opportunity for everyone to learn and engage with her and the principles that guide her coaching. Today, we're going to talk about thought habits and how we can alter them to help propel us forward. Let's jump in. Amy, I am so excited to have you here today. You have a wonderful book that we're going to get into, but I first want to start with a story that happened to you that was a turning point in your career on how you changed with your leadership style and also really your career trajectory. So would you love to go into that for us?
I would love to. So setting the stage, I was preparing for our annual meeting with our financial advisor, Tess. She is a trusted friend, advisor, someone I really respect and admire. I had spent the hours filling out all of the forms, the forms that ask what your goals are, where you are, kind of just the general, financial advisor questions. At that time, I was leading a huge sales organization of people, probably, about 1,000 people across the country, and kind of was publicly perceived as a success, sort of like at the top of the mountain professionally in this one space, right? A small space, but it felt, significant. So I had prepared all of this. We, at that time, I have 3 kids, and they were in what I call the Uber stage of parenting, which is no driver's licenses and everyone in things. And so it was just a very intense time at home in terms of the demands on our schedules. My husband is an administrator at our local high school. So he's an assistant principal, and then he also coaches. So we walk into this meeting, and it was one of those things where I remember even what I was wearing. I remember that the chair I was sitting on was sort of like a burgundy burlap sort of a color. It was cold in there. It was summer, so the air conditioning was sort of blowing. And Tess says, well, I reviewed all of your paperwork, and she has all these papers in front of her, sort of in like a little stack. And she said, everything looks amazing. You have been really diligent in your budget. You're not overspending. You're doing a great job managing what you have. There's only one problem. If you want to achieve the goals that you also included in the form. And then she sort of leaned forward on her little pile, and she looked at us and she said, you're not making enough money. And I don't remember anything else that happened in the rest of the meeting. I remember that there was more talking, obviously, but I had this very real moment where I looked around the room, and my husband is doing what he's supposed to do. He's so great at it. The only way he's making more money is by getting older, and that his income is not in his hands. I was looking around the room to see if there was anyone else on whose shoulder this issue could fall. And unfortunately, I was the only one. And 2 things were abundantly clear in that moment. One, I couldn't work any more hours. I was already working full time. I was not willing to miss things that our kids were involved in at that time. It was really important to me that I was present at home. So I was already working full time. I couldn't work any more hours. This was my problem. And I just had to really make a decision in that moment of, do I change the goals, or do I really acknowledge this truth and start to really address what was at the core of the problem, which was actually me and the way that I saw myself and the way that I was thinking. And so the core message of my book sort of stemmed from that story, which is, you can't outwork your thought habits. Because in the past, what I would have done is just worked more. I would have worked harder to create more. But in this moment, that was no longer a viable option. And so I had to learn to replace the subconscious habits of thinking that were no longer serving me.
That is such a great story, and thank you for sharing it. And I can only imagine, right? You have these dreams, you're raising a family, you're feeling successful in your career, you're feeling great about things, and then you're told, well, that you are great, but if you want to achieve these goals, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So
And the goals were big. I mean, I have high, I could have easily, I'm glad I didn't, but I could have easily just said, you know what, just be realistic, pare this back. But I also had this sort of, I will, when it comes to my family, or like, I will rise up. There's something in you. I don't know what that is, but it's sort of like this inner, uh, I will not back downness in me, right? Where I thought, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I will figure this out. I don't know how, but I will not give up on those goals, and I will not work more. But I've since realized also that a lot of professional people get to this same stage, or this same moment, where the thing that got them where they are, which is just to work really hard and to do things really well, isn't going to get you to the next level of leadership, or the next level of income, or the next level of impact. Something else has to change, because that, what you've used to get there, sort of has run its course.
yeah, I really love that. And you're right, because, and it's interesting how you talk about your husband and your kids being in the time of their lives that they're very active in sports and doing things. And that is what you're taught: work harder, work harder, work harder. And that may be putting more hours in, practicing more, whatever. And so we're taught that early in our careers as well, and through college. And you're right, you get to that point in your career that you're like, how many hours in the day do I have here? And then you have a family. And so now it's work different. And you said a very interesting thing that said you can't outwork your thought habits. So help me understand that a little bit more. What are thought habits, and how do they affect us?
Yes, this is so critical. So we talk a lot about habits just in the general business spaces, time management habits, but a lot about external habits. What we don't talk about enough is that our brains are hardwired for survival. And subconsciously, we have a lot of patterns of thinking, which I call thought habits in the work that I do. And these are the grooves in your brain that get deeper and deeper with repetition. One of them, for example, could be, if you want more, work harder, right? That's a thought habit. That's something ingrained in you. And you've run that script through your brain so many times. And so it's an easy groove to just slide back into. Just work harder, put your nose down. There's a whole bunch of sayings that go along with it. But these subconscious habits of thinking are happening at a level that we're not aware of. And we are being impacted by them every single minute of every single day. We are not them. They are just our thoughts, but they are impacting us. And I actually had worked with a coach in my sales career about 15 years ago. And he used this assessment tool called the Habit Finder, and it measures those subconscious habits of thinking. And then there's the curriculum that goes along with it. When I worked with him as a leader, my business quadrupled in size. It was the most significant work I ever did. This changing. And then I got to this new place, and it was time to sort of address it again and like go back and look at what was happening in this new iteration.
Thank you for sharing that. And this is so interesting because I have not heard of this habit finder a little bit. So I'd love to understand more. You talk a little bit about the subconscious and the grooves, which becomes our subconscious. So can you dive into that a little bit more to help us understand like what's the difference in that type of coaching?
Absolutely. Well, retraining your brain and rewiring it is very slow work, but it's very impactful. Let me give you an example of another habit of thinking that might resonate with a lot of your listeners. There's one particular measurement in the assessment that if you are at risk in this area, it leans toward obligation. So this habit of thinking sounds like I have to, I need to, I should, I have to, I need to, I should. Now, in the process of growing a business or growing a career, if you imagine, it's sort of like climbing up a mountain where there's a natural resistance to the work of doing it. It takes energy to build something like that. And so we embark on this journey, and there's a natural resistance to just doing what you need to do to grow the thing. This habit of thinking, I have to, I need to, I should, is like strapping on a 100-pound backpack to climb the same mountain. And for most people that I work with, they don't have a lot of extra energy to just be tossing out the window. And so we're trying to eliminate this habit of thinking, replacing it with, I choose to, I want to, I get to. I choose to, show up at this meeting fully present, not distracted, not I have to go to the Monday morning meeting. But this habit of thinking is so pervasive that you'll hear yourself, oh, I need to take out the garbage. Oh, I really should be going to the gym. Oh, I have to pick up the kids. It starts to show up everywhere. And what you're doing by playing this loop is just draining your energy. It just makes everything feel heavy and overwhelming. So again, you might not even be aware that you're doing that until you bring it into the conscious. And then all of a sudden, you'll hear yourself saying it all the time. Oh, I need to do that, and it has that sort of hunched shoulder need to, you kind of even bend over when you say it. But again, for most people, when I show them this measurement after they take the assessment, they aren't aware they're walking around doing that all day. But once you point it out, oh my goodness, there it is, there it is, there it is, there it is. So it's just an example of a habit of thinking that can slow your progress without you even being aware of it.
I love that. I talk a lot about how words matter and how it changes our trajectory without even thinking about it, as long as we're using those right words. And those are just simple words that, like you said, we might even be saying without even recognizing it. So I love that piece. Now, you talk about rhythms, and I'm one that when I set a goal, I'm going and nothing's getting in my way. But we talk about the working and the living in rhythms and this guilt-free play you talk about. So I'd love for you to get into a little bit like, what are the benefits and how can someone like me engage in a little more play in their life?
This is so important. So I want you to imagine sort of like a clock, the face of a clock. And at the top of it, I want you to imagine this idea of scheduled guilt-free play, where in your calendar on a regular basis, you have things scheduled that you're looking forward to. So for example, tonight I'm playing in a pickleball league. I'm so excited about the game tonight. Like I actually, just last week, I looked over at my assistant who works in my office here and I said, I'm so excited to play pickleball tonight. Where, you're sort of giddy like a little kid where it's like this fun thing you're looking forward to. On in addition, scheduled guilt-free play can be dinner with a friend. It can be a walk with someone. It can be time to read your favorite book or watch a show that's just ridiculous, but you love it. It can be this weekend, I went to Palm Springs with 3 college girlfriends that we've been friends for 25 years, that I had been looking forward to that weekend for months. And it gave me that sort of just energy inside, kind of like a little kid energy. So what we know is that when you have scheduled guilt-free playtime in your calendar, when you go to work, you tend to do a higher, more focused quality of work because you have something to look forward to at the end of it. And so you actually engage with the work in a different way, which then leads to, on your clock, kind of down to 6 o'clock, the ability to fully enjoy the guilt-free play when you're there because you've done this great quality of work when you're working. And so you fully enjoy the time away without thinking about it, without feeling guilty that you're not working, which leads to when you don't feel guilty for playing and you're in it, it leads to creative ideas. It allows your brain to create new connections. It gives you solutions to problems. How do I say this to this person? Or it just gives you the energy to have those difficult conversations with more focus, which again leads you back up to the top of your circle, which is the scheduled guilt-free play. But what we try to do is then work until we feel like we deserve the play, but that's not really the way that it works best. That doesn't really promote this cycle of the highest quality of work that you can do. And it doesn't matter if you're working on your PhD, if you're working on a huge project for work, if you're starting a business. I find that's the hardest time to really use this as a discipline is when there's financial pressure, you're starting something, it feels like you should be working all the time because you need the money, right? That is the hardest time to really stick to the discipline of the guilt-free play.
Yeah, I really like that. And there's so much research that has shown that when you take time away, you actually perform better when you're doing that. And you're right, when you're starting a new project, starting a new role, you're trying to not only prove to yourself that you can do it, but you're trying to prove to others. And that brings on that guilt of, oh, I need to keep working. But the reality is there's always going to be more work and more than you can do in one day. So I try to tell people, look, what's the one thing you want to get done today? And when you leave, can you say, I did the best that I could? And if you can say, I did the best that I could, then that's all anyone can ever ask of you. And taking that time away and doing a little bit of playtime. And like you said, it could be just sitting in nature. It could be just anything, just getting some time to rest and relax.
Absolutely. And as the further up you go in the ranks of leadership and or business ownership, the work is never done. And so you decide when the work is done and you tell it when you're done. That's the shift, or else you will create something that will swallow you whole, essentially. I mean, you will create something that consumes every part of your life. And there comes a point in that growth where you have to set the boundary. You have to tell it what it will be. And when you first do that, because of the hardwiring of our brain, particularly if growing up you survived by working really hard and achieving, everything in your brain is going to scream danger. I mean, it will scream danger, 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 right? Even this weekend, one of my friends is in a new role and it's a sales role and she's building it kind of from the bottom up. And she was saying like, I feel so guilty that I haven't looked at my computer. I feel, it was this, I could just feel that energy in her. And so we had this long conversation about like, the bigger it's getting, the more it's asking of you. And businesses and careers are hungry and they will eat as much as you let them eat. And so you have to say, no, I'm done for the day. I always remember this. A good friend of ours, he owned a huge construction company, and I would go over to their house when I was, this is a while ago, but it would be like 4:15, 4:30, and he would be sitting at the counter having a beer. And I would always say, "Don't you have stuff to do? Like, aren't there pressing things?" Because I know that this, I knew he was doing really big projects and there's that, And he said, "I have learned that I get to a certain point and I just have to say enough and I'm done." And I never forgot that. Like, I always remember him sitting there with that beer and thinking, noted.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Yeah, trick I've done is look, the things you want to do for yourself, for your family, those are the same, if not higher in priority as the stuff you're doing for your job. And so if I want to spend time with my family, if I want to play my pickleball tonight, if I want, like, whatever that is, it is just as important as the work that you need to get done for your job. And yes, your job is giving you the financial duty, so you have all that behind you, and with that weight, but your family and your health, if you don't have that, you can't work, right? So you have to take care of yourself. So
Well, and if you think about it also, I'll always ask, like, what do you want to create? And when I say that, I don't mean like an artist, but it is kind of like, what do you want to create with your one and only life? And when I think of that, I think of the whole picture. Yes, my work is important. I love my work. I love to work, frankly. I think it's so fun. I love to grow things and to see growth happen in business and to, I love that process. But that's also just one part of the creative process. I'm also creating once I'm done with work. I'm creating relationships with my family. I'm creating relationships with my kids. I'm creating community. I'm creating friendship. I'm creating my physical experience by like how I'm taking care of my body. Like you said, your health kind of, right? But that is part of the creation too. My work is a vehicle that provides income so that I can create over here. But my work isn't the thing. It is just a part of the whole picture.
yeah, yeah, it's your whole self, right? And as we get older, we look at what is our legacy? What are we leaving behind? And especially if you have a family, or as you build your career, you think about that. And it's a really good point to consider of how do I want to be? How do people want to remember me? And who do I want to be?
Yeah. And I also, because my kids are older now, they're 21, 18, and then I still have a 14-year-old at home. But I have so much free time now. So I'll just say if you're a parent in the thick of the Uber parenting, or you have babies or really littles, and this is for moms and dads without question, because sometimes I feel like I don't want the dads to miss that any more than I want the moms to miss it. I don't want anyone to miss out on their kids. I will say it goes fast and then they are actually gone. It's kind of amazing, but also, um, it's not always fun when you're in it. Like, sometimes to me, the work felt more fun than the coming home and everybody's fighting and, it's just I don't know. Even we always laugh about this, but even family vacations, sometimes I'm like, in the moment, they're not always that fun, but then you hear your kid talk about it, and I wanna say, were we at the same place? Because everyone was fighting, I was sweating, there were bugs and they're talking about it like it was the greatest day in the history of humanity, and I am thinking, "Oh my goodness," but that's creation, right? We're creating those experiences and sharing in them, but that is the hard part, that home part, it's messy, there's no progress, nobody's saying, "Great job." And so just don't flee from it because it doesn't feel like invest there also.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I want to bring up I have a lot of clients and I know a lot of colleagues and stuff that they don't have children. They chose that for their life. This doesn't mean that changes. This is still about what is important to you, what what do you want to be part of in life outside of work? Even if you don't have children, you absolutely have those wants and those needs still, and you should prioritize them the same.
Absolutely. And also, just because you don't have children doesn't mean you should be the one working on the weekends to cover for everyone else, right? Absolutely not. You absolutely are creating a life just like people who chose to have children, right? You are creating investments in your community, investments in your physical being, you are also creating in that space outside of work, and it is equally important and valuable. Oh gosh, do I ever believe that to be true? Also, this is unrelated, but we talk about this a lot with doing unpaid labor outside of work where you're doing a lot of like the household things. I always will say to people, they think, oh, well, I don't have kids, so I don't have a lot of unpaid labor that I do outside of work. That is so false. In fact, when I go through the list of all the unpaid labor that is done in the world, this is like the shopping, the cooking, the cleaning, the errand running, the bill paying, all of that, the yard, the taking care of the car, the planning the vacation, all of that. There's only 2 things on the list in my book that have anything to do with caregiving of either older family members or community members or your children. So the vast majority of people still are doing a huge amount of unpaid labor, whether you have children or not. I think that's so important.
That is great recognition. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's great. So hopefully kind of bringing into perspective of where you are in your life. It doesn't matter. It's about you and what do you need to focus on and what's important. You talk about in your book boundaries spectrum, since we were talking about boundaries a few minutes ago. Where did this concept come from? And tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So the concept came from all of the conversations I was having with clients where I was seeing patterns. And what I noticed is that I was working with people who were, we'll call them, and this is such a dorky term, but beasts in the boardroom, sort of take charge, get things done. Nobody's messing with me. I'm leading the charge, making decisions, whatever kind of a persona at work. And then they would go home and they were sort of like a doormat, either in an unhealthy relationship or letting family members walk all over them or their kids walk all over them. And I couldn't figure out how the 2 things could exist at the same time. And so what I started to realize is that there's this spectrum, and on one end would be thick, high walls, emotional walls. No one knows me. I'm not letting you in. I'm not vulnerable. I'm just this facade that people are seeing. Kind of people are scared of me, that like wall, just a thick, high wall. On the other end is no boundaries at all. This is the, you know, saying yes when I want to say no, letting people mistreat me, letting behaviors go that are inappropriate or disruptive in my home, letting people walk in my door anytime, whether I want them there or not. And what I started to realize is that in the middle is this area of healthy boundaries, right? Where um, I'm deciding what's allowed into my space and not. I am teaching people how to treat me, and I'm not letting them mistreat me. I'm removing myself from places where they are. So if you can imagine this line, what I realized is that if you take the 2 ends and bring them together at the top like a circle, the life experience of people with very high walls who are very walled off emotionally from people and don't let people in and don't have any boundaried relationships, very small circle of people really know them. And the experience of someone with no boundaries are very similar. And they're actually stemming from the same thing. And so it made sense to me that you could have both things happening in your world at the same time that seemed so opposite. But it made total sense because it's like I either keep everyone out and I'm safe, or I let everything go. But there was no ability to say, like, this is okay and this is not okay in their experience.
That is a great view. I love the analogy with the walls and being able to think about that. So it really helps me visualize because you're right. When I think of people I know that have the high walls or the low walls, the end result can be pretty similar with where they're at. So really good.
Isolation, loneliness, frustration, overwhelm, taking on too much, exhaustion, burnout. They have very similar experiences.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, there's that sound. It's time for our fun questions. Are you ready for our fun questions?
I am.
All right. The first one is, would you prefer to have a superpower that makes you invisible or a superpower that lets you fly?
Okay, because I had a really rough flight landing in Chicago last night, I'm going to say invisible.
So if I would have asked you before yesterday, it might have been a different answer.
We landed and they said, you're only the third flight that we let land in Chicago tonight. I was like, oh, great.
Oh, my goodness.
So, yes, invisible.
All right, invisible it is. All right, would you prefer to receive handwritten letters or getting a surprise gift?
Oh, my gosh. I am a words of affirmation person, 100%. Yes. And I never know what to do with stuff. I get overwhelmed with the like physical things. Then I feel obligated to keep it. And, where do I put it? So I love the words. Give me the words.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. It's about someone taking the time and writing something. There's really nothing better. Okay. Last question. Do you want to always know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, or have the ability to change any past decision you've made?
I wouldn't go back. I just wouldn't go back because I feel like it would take away from who I am and what I've become. Even the hard parts, the really painful parts, the mistakes, I just wouldn't go back. So I think it would be the knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. This partially, I'm like, I'm not sure I would want that either.
Yeah, I agree. Your past is what defines who you are. And even though it's tough times, you are always a better person from it. And so I completely agree. But the future can be scary.
Yeah.
At times as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Amy, thank you so much. A lot of great nuggets that I know that our listeners are going to walk away from. And if they want to know more, they can get your book. It's called I See You. We'll have the information in the show notes for everyone, but really appreciate everything you shared with us today, and all good things.
Thanks so much, Stacey.
If you enjoyed the show, please go to leadershipmomentspodcast.com to subscribe to the podcast or on your favorite player, as well as follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
You can also send us a message on what you like and don't like, or what guest you want us to have on the show.
So until next time.
This is Stacey Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
And I'm Tracy Ann Palmer. Be the change you wish to see in the world.